Good evening, everyone. Welcome to ThetaTalks. My name is Maisha Chulani, and I will be soon joined by Sanaiyah Gurnamal, and we are here every week to talk some Theta. We want to talk a little bit about our journey in Theta, and of course, involve other people into it. So keep your ears and eyes open because we are going to have some more special guests who are going to share with us their experience with Theta healing as well. So this evening, we would like to explore the topic of being the strong one, being the mature one, being the reliable one, being the one who couldn't or didn't fall apart. Some of us growing up had to grow up pretty quickly. We had to kind of fill in roles of other people in our lives. For instance, if our mother couldn't be there or wasn't or didn't have the capacity to show up, we had to fill her place. So today's episode is for all those people who have felt that feeling of burden, that feeling of obligation, into having to step up, into having to take care of the people around them. So this is to give you guys a space and essence and energy so that you are able to understand why you might be that way, and of course to give you some insight and what you can do about it. At every episode, we always talk about a great opportunity, which is the emotional breakthrough sessions. These are great for you to be able to explore and understand a little bit deeper into Theta healing or every one of our topics. We always talk about giving yourself some space to be able to connect with us so that you can understand a little bit more about your own personal journey. When we talk about things, it's more about general perspective or point of view, but an emotional breakthrough session is a one-on-one session that you will have with myself or one of the healers that you choose, where you're going to explore where you're at the moment and where you'd like to get to and what is the missing link between the two. So a lot of the times my clients get an aha moment, gets a realization or even an understanding. And sometimes all we need is to see. Seeing is freeing. To understand, I am this way because of this. That in itself is a big eye-opener. And what we can do after that and decide, how we want to pursue it and see your next steps. So an emotional breakthrough session is a great opportunity for you to understand yourself and understand why you are doing some of the things. So getting back to the topic of being the strong one, keeping the family together, right? Is there or have you ever felt this way? So especially in Asian households have more of that pressure and more of that feeling of obligation, more so, especially in the Southeast Asian households than other than Western families. I'm not saying that there are none, but a lot of our clients who come in have this inherent expectation that is put upon them. Now, in the Philippines, it's slightly different, where the youngest one is supposed to take care of the parents. However, in the context or the perspective of family constellations, in the perspective of some Asian households, it is the eldest person or the boy in the family who is supposed to step up and take care of the family. So this is something that can be really spoken about, or it could be something that is sort of hinted, right? It could be things that you have picked up by seeing your parents do that for their parents, and assuming or out of love, you end up wanting to replicate that. And there is nothing wrong with actually doing that. It's just about understanding that that shouldn't be about obligation. So, I was just doing a little bit intro about this topic and saying, there's a lot of pressure,
Okay.
right? From especially like the South Asian community on who has to take care of the family or the
Okay.
parents, or there's an inherent expectation that, my kids will end up taking care of me, or, I need, or in the Philippines, it's the youngest in the house that takes care of the parents, right? So
Eldest? Isn't it eldest?
the Philippines is actually the youngest, right? From what I've
Okay.
seen. So the
Okay, that's
eldest is,
interesting.
yeah, and eldest is actually also a very prominent kind of, you hear that a lot, especially in
Yeah.
family constellations, but youngest is also there,
Okay, because
so.
I've also heard in the Philippines there's this idea of the eldest daughter,
Mm.
has to take all the responsibility for the family. So yeah.
Yeah, because usually what tends to happen is I see in my sessions, the eldest or everybody gets married, the youngest one is left, and
Hmm.
they end up, because of having this obligation, they end up being single or not being in relationships because of that.
Okay. Very interesting. Sorry, I have
Yeah.
to move my chair so I could be a little higher. There we go. Okay. Now you guys can see me a little clearer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me. So you've introduced the topic.
Yes.
And where do you want to start with today's conversation?
So what I was talking about when you came in was, that moving out of a space of obligation and
Hmm.
exploring a little bit more about that expectation that inherent. So going a little bit to the family constellation aspect of things, right? Is that the eldest is the one that actually takes the biggest burden, or that a lot of the issues are actually held being the eldest. Okay.
Okay.
Then the more siblings you have, the less responsibility energetically, and the less you take on. So
Okay.
there is an actual aspect of it, which is the true aspect of it through family constellations, that is how it actually works, right? Which is probably why a lot of cultures have also had that similarity or that understanding that the eldest, or even being the boy, you're supposed to be taking care of the family, so that is actually something that we explore quite a bit in that, because a lot of the times what ends up happening is, let's say the eldest is unable to, right? So somehow the younger sibling assumes that role, right? And ends up taking that responsibility. So the reason I want to highlight that is because you might be the middle in the family or the youngest and not the eldest, but still feel like I'm the one who's taking the responsibility, or it's me who feels like they have to take care of the family. So it could also be that it is because the other people in your family weren't able to, right? Which is why you may also feel this way. So it's relevant to many different people who are the eldest or the youngest, or the boy, or even the eldest woman or girl in the family.
Okay. But tell me again. So what is our, because I'm still a little lost about what is our topic for today. So because Maisha always, by the way, for those listeners, Maisha is the only one who decides our topic. So I'm lost. Tell me, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about
Um,
responsibility, or that feeling
okay.
of responsibility of being the one to take care, or being the strong one, or being the eldest one, or taking over the responsibility of the family.
Okay. So what have you experienced in your healing sessions, in your theta healing sessions with your clients? Like, how does this show up? And what usually comes at the end of the healing, what's the resolution, or what is the healing that needs to happen when people do feel like they have to take all the responsibility as the eldest or as the middle even, or even as the youngest, depending on what culturally they've been raised with.
So, like how you say, it's no coincidence. I had a session just now, or like a couple of hours ago. So my client came in feeling very anxious, She's in her 50s. She's been taking care of her father. And her father is very sickly and he has dementia. And so she's been taking care of him, but she somehow felt very anxious because she feels that she might get sick. Now, her fear is if she gets sick, who will take care of her like the way that she's taking care of her father? Will she be supported by somebody? She doesn't want to put that expectation on her kids, and she is a single mom. She's not in a relationship. So for her, that anxiety is causing her to go to the ER, or high blood pressure. She's just feeling very anxious. So in this session, what it led up to was this feeling of all the women in her family were the ones who had to be the responsible one, who had to, who worked and who carried the responsibility, and ended up, so that was what was passed down generation after generation, because her grandfather died fairly young. She had assumed responsibility. Her mother also was the one who was, kind of earning more in the relationship. And even with her, she's the one who has to carry that on. Right. So in this situation, this is how it showed up, where she felt that she needed to be that, she needed to survive that way alone, right? Being the strong one, being alone, taking on that responsibility. Her mom is still around, but her mom and dad don't live together because they're always constantly fighting, right? So at the end of the day, she's taking care of her dad, whereas her mom is not. So there is like this is why it's causing her a lot of anxiety as well. So once we worked on that and cleared that need for her to assume or take on that responsibility and do it out of love, and do it out of the fact that he's my father, and I am able to do it and understand. And what she saw and what she realized in this healing is every ancestor of hers, or her aunts and uncles, somebody did come in to help and support them even through their old age. So she doesn't need to fear that, because the universe will obviously, or will send somebody to also support her, because now she's open to receiving support versus I need to do everything on my own.
So what I'm understanding from the client story you shared is that a lot of us, including your client, sometimes carry this burden of responsibility. Like either we have to take care of our parents or our children, or we feel anxious or stressed about some form of responsibility. It doesn't have to be only like familial. It could be any kind of responsibility, financial responsibility. And because we might be either genetically carrying that responsibility, for example, our ancestors did, our parents did, and then finally we have to carry that same obligation.
Hang on, I just lost you. 1 second. Let me take out my...
Over time that you...
okay, I couldn't hear what you were saying. You want to repeat?
Yeah, apologies. It's actually my mom calling, and my mom's in Dubai. So
okay, I lost you again, but go ahead. You're going to take that call?
Yeah, I'm going to take that call. So go ahead and continue with the live stream. And I'm going to come back on after speaking to my mom, just because she's in Dubai with the whole war happening there. I want to make sure I take the call.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, so just adding on to what we were discussing regarding my client, and what Sanaiyah was saying, that responsibility that we assume or that we take on. And I think, with expounding to not just it has to be the responsibility of the eldest. I think in the Philippines, if you go abroad, automatically because you're earning a lot of money, you are all of a sudden the one who has to be responsible, right? I see that also a lot with my clients where they end up being the bread earners and they don't end up saving for themselves. They don't end up keeping anything for themselves because all of a sudden the expectation is there that you have to support now the rest of us because you're the one who's earning more. So even seeing that is also very often it comes into my sessions because at the end of the day, if that keeps happening, then the person who has that burden of responsibility is very draining for them, right? At the end of the day, they don't end up saving for themselves. They don't end up having enough for even or they feel guilty about spending on themselves because they have this burden of responsibility on them. So this is also another aspect, another angle that I see in my sessions. Another area that I do see a lot is also um, the child having to be the parent, right? So in circumstances or situations, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, where your parent, whether it's your mom, and mostly a lot of the times that I see it's the mother, was not able to be the mom. For example, she was away a lot, or she was um, occupied with working, or I see Sanaiyah saying hi. I'm just gonna request her to join. Okay, all okay?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's a bit scary, these days.
Yeah, I if I get a call from Dubai, it's definitely like, okay, pause whatever you're doing and, take the
Yeah,
call.
yeah.
But yes, so did I miss anything? I know you probably
Yeah. So
continued
I
on.
was I was talking about in the Philippines, it's also, OFWs. When you start going abroad, then all of a sudden you have to be the bread earner because you're earning the most. It's expected, right? And you don't end up saving money. You don't end up doing things for yourself, or you feel very guilty to kind of spend on yourself. So it shows up in these ways. And I was talking a little bit about children who have to grow up very soon or assume the role of the parent. I see that quite a bit also in the Philippines where, you have many siblings, and then just because you're the eldest, now because your mom has to work or your mom is not around, then you have to be the mother, right? And because you have to assume the responsibility of the mother, then not only are you, or it's not about you playing your own role in your life. It's more about now you have to play that role of a mother. And, that's very difficult for a child or a young person to not be able to experience having a mother around. So that's also something that I see a lot. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that a lot of people carry the sense of obligations and responsibilities, and it feels heavy. But if they were able to let go of fear, anxiety, maybe sometimes resentment, maybe have more forgiveness, better boundaries. So these are all different types of ways that we support people who are struggling or feeling challenged by this situation. And when we're able to support them through theta healing and heal whatever is coming up for them, then they are able to take care of the people they love with so much more joy and ease, and they feel more comfortable doing it. So
Yeah.
it's a very good example. The client you shared earlier, how
Mm,
at the end of the session she could actually take care of her father without the fear of what if there's no one to take care of me. So it was
yeah.
coming from a place of more safety and security, and she had to recognize, go back and understand that there's always been someone who
Hmm.
has come for
Through
some
her.
member,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
for some member of her family. He's always showed up, and that is how her family has, you could say,
Been
um,
supported.
been
Yeah.
supported through the genetic line. And
Mm-hmm.
so all she needs to do is tune into that feeling, that sense of safety and security, and everything will turn out okay. And
Yeah.
it's really interesting because the situation we're going through is always just neutral. What I mean by that is, we're all going, okay, let's say in the Middle East, right? People are going through a very difficult time. It's a war, and people are now experiencing this. But everybody will experience this differently. Some people will feel very anxious. Some people will stay calm. Some people will have panic attacks or nervous breakdowns. Some people will be patient. So everyone reacts to challenges or difficulties in their environment differently. And through healing, through the kind of work that we do as theta healers and as coaches and healers who support people through theta healing, we can help you, for example, change the way you experience an event. So it doesn't have to feel painful, difficult, heavy, stressful, challenging. It can actually, you can approach it very differently. You can feel differently in the same situation. And we've seen, and I'm sure many of you who are listening and have experienced that when you go into a situation feeling calm, feeling more relaxed, feeling more confident, you're more likely to get a positive outcome or
For
to
sure.
deal with things in a better way. And your
Clarity.
mind, your mind is a little bit more open, a little bit more creative. You come up with more creative solutions when you're not stressed out. Your nervous system is not, on alert. You're just kind of like, okay, well, this is happening. I'm experiencing this. So, for example, my parents are in Dubai. There are, missiles. There's all kinds of things going off. And it is, drones being intercepted. All these things are happening. Now, I can be on stress mode, fully like panicked and, being unable to sleep. And like, I could be really stressed. And I know people like that. Or I can just send love, safety, protection to them. And I can be the support they need when they're feeling a little bit challenged in the
Anxious. Yeah.
situation. Yeah, a little anxious or challenged. So I'm choosing to experience it a different way than maybe somebody else. And that makes all the difference, right?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about specifically today's topic, which is a lot of people do feel like they're carrying heavy burdens or responsibility, whether they're an eldest child or, whatever roles they're playing, but that is just an experience they're choosing to have. And by shifting the experience, they can approach the same circumstance or event in a different way, one that is more likely to reach more positive outcomes.
Yeah. Going back to my client earlier that I was talking about, was she her mom was like that. Her grandmother was like that, right? So when I asked her, how far back does it go? And she's like, very far back, right? But
Is this
what
something,
was
was
very,
this something she was conscious about, or you took her into theta to get that
yeah,
information?
theta, to
Okay.
get that
So,
information.
because I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, I wouldn't even know how far back something goes.
No, so it
But
was as
it's
simple as, where do you feel it? Okay, where do you think it's coming from? So it's not very complicated. I think sometimes people overcomplicate things versus if you really can feel it, then somehow that message will just show
the
up,
answer
right? It's
shows up.
about
Yeah.
trusting. And so the reason I was going back to this was because she had so many people that did the same thing. And now she's going to break that cycle and choose something different, right? Which is what she did, which is what exactly you're talking about. You get to choose just because everybody's reacting this way or people around you are, it doesn't mean that you have to follow. Just because your culture requires you as being the eldest or the youngest or whoever or the male to take it on does not mean that you have to follow in that footsteps.
Completely.
You get to choose to live differently, and it's okay. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you don't belong part of that ancestry. It doesn't mean that you're not part of the family anymore. I think that's a lot of the times people get anxious because it's like it's easier to follow and be part of that community and belonging, right? Versus to kind of think independently.
Okay. I agree with you completely. And I think what I'd love to share here is that's what my TEDx talk was about. You know,
Mm,
your life your life isn't yours until you love yourself. Because I
mm,
really talk about this whole thing about
yeah.
how, what we have is the power of our choice.
Mm,
We get to decide whether we're going to feel anxious, feel, abused by someone, if we're going to feel, we're going to let people cross our boundaries, if we're going to do
yeah.
what we want, or we're always going to do what other people want. That is always our choice. If we want to get better, if we want to be sick on some level, even those are choices we have made.
Yeah. And
Though
even
there
not
might
making
be
a choice is a choice.
even not making a choice is a
Mm,
choice. And some of
yeah.
these choices are made on a subconscious level. So you
Mm,
may think that's not what you want, but if you're experiencing it, you've definitely
chosen
chosen
it.
it
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
some level. So
Mm,
my TEDx talk was really about how we can be more conscious and intentional about the choices we make.
mm,
And it ties right back into the idea that how we experience every situation in our life is ultimately our choice. Whether
yeah.
we see it as a burden or a responsibility, or we see it as a gift
Mm,
and something that allows us to grow or to be better for it or
yeah.
to give back, and to feel like
Yeah.
you're giving back, whether it's to your
Yeah.
family or to your community or to your ancestors.
And
These
see,
are all choices.
at the end of the day, what I think, with a lot of my clients, what we forget is they don't want you to be like them. They want you to be better and live your life better than what they did. But what we end up doing is we just, you know, copy, paste, follow, thinking that's what they want us to do exactly the same thing as they did.
Yeah.
Now, it's like we
Because
live in a
what's
different
familiar,
time. Yeah.
but what's familiar is comfortable, right?
Yeah.
We always do what is our natural default setting, what we've always
Yeah.
done before, or what we've done over and over again. We just tend
Yeah.
to do it that way. And more often than not, we don't question, right? We don't ask ourselves, like, is this the best way to get from point A to point B? Or is there a
Just do
shortcut?
it.
Is
Yeah.
there a different way?
Mm,
So I was in a coaching call this morning, and um, I was, there was something that I knew I had to do differently,
mm.
but I was resisting to do it because I'm so used to doing it this same way for so long. It was almost easier to stay where I am, doing things the same way, than have to learn a whole different way of doing it, even though that was going to get me better results.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. Sometimes we stay in relationships even though we're not happy.
Yeah.
Sometimes we make choices we don't really want. We stay in
Hmm.
jobs we don't want. We
Yeah.
do things we don't really want to do. Um, we do what other people want us to do than what we really want, and that's just because it's more comfortable
Yeah.
than to do the braver, more difficult, more complicated, unknown,
Yeah.
uncertain thing, which is to do it
Which
differently.
could be giving you a life that could be even better than what you have now.
And the only problem is we don't have that
Trust.
guarantee.
Yeah.
We don't have the trust, and we don't have the
Mm.
guarantee that we're going to get there. So
Yeah.
even then, we prefer to stay where we are.
Yeah.
But almost every single time when we make that shift, or we kind of cross over to the other side, we're so grateful we did. And we couldn't, we look at it and we're like, why did we ever think,
Yeah.
we wanted to stay
Yeah.
back there?
Why did it
So
take us so long?
why did it take us so long, when it was so much easier to do this new way? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, such is life.
Yeah. So
Okay, cards. What do the cards say today?
get the shortcut, try our EBS session rather than taking
Yeah,
the long way. So the card is creativity.
creative solutions.
Mm,
When you aren't stuck in your patterns, and you aren't stuck with the fear, the anxiousness, the obligations, the expectations, and you move out of that negative energy and you start looking at things as like from a more positive perspective, a more relaxed, calm, patient, open perspective, then that's where creativity starts to show up. We come up with more creative solutions. We look
Versus
at
recycling everything, right? Too.
absolutely love that, love that, love that.
So
okay.
good.
On that note, stay safe, everyone. I'm sure if you have loved ones that are being impacted by what's happening in our world today, I know there's a lot of people feeling really anxious about World War III and all kinds of things. And that should be, by the way, the next
topic.
Next topic, how to deal with those things. But what I do want to say is that, we all have a choice. Okay. And healing is a choice just as much as staying where you are. And neither is wrong or right. It's just your choice.
Awesome. See you guys next week.
Bye.